We are in the middle of chapter 3. So we've been talking about the fact in chapter 3 that there's 3 intellectual components, Chochmah, Bina, Daas, which give rise to the 7 emotions. And they are the mothers, and the midas, the emotions, are the children that come from them. And that means you can't actually control the emotions unless you get deep down into the intellect. And he went through in the intellect, broke it down, how it works with Chochmah and Bina are actually a father and a mother. So when you intellectualize a concept, the first order of the day is you have to just let go. And you don't understand, and suddenly the lightning strikes, the penny drops, and you get it. That's called a father. A father gives his little, tiny little thing, and the mother takes it from there. So once I have an idea, I develop the idea in what's called Bina. So that's Abba ve'ima is Chochmah and Bina. Yeah? Now, right, we'll get to Daas in a moment. Because Daas is when a father and a mother will never have a baby. Unless they do Daas. If a man sits next to a woman, he'll never have a baby. They have to actually get together in Daas, and then they can have a baby. And that's what we're going to discuss today. So, when you meditate and reflect on Hashem, and how Hashem is filling the world and surrounds the world, everything is God, that arouses in you a fear of Hashem. And in turn, that fear brings you to a love of Hashem because you yearn for Hashem. That's what we're holding. So now, I want to just explain this. Nowadays, we like to manufacture emotions. And that's a big, big problem. We manufacture emotions. And what does that mean? We go to, I don't know, how do people how does a Rav get the community to be excited about Yom Kippur?
Experiences.
What?
Everything's experiences.
So when you get to Yom Kippur, he wants to give a drusha on Yom Kippur. What does he speak about? A sermon, a story about? Tshuva? No, come on. A story about?
Something sad.
Something sad, like?
An orphan and a father.
Right, an orphan and a father and the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And then everyone cries, and then the emotion is ignited, and now we can walk into the holiday, into Yom Kippur. Right? And on Tisha B'Av, you watch all sorts of sad stories, right? Exactly. So what you're doing is essentially manufacturing emotions. That's how we like to do it. And nowadays, we're very into manufacturing emotions. We have a whole industry of trillions of dollars. Music manufactures emotions, absolutely. So does everything you do. It's all about creating an ambiance so that the emotion is there. Right? And the truth is that that's a problem. That's a huge, huge issue. That's where we go wrong. Emotions are not created. Emotions come about when you have a deep connection to the intellectual matter. So when you truly, how do you get to have a relationship with Hashem? It's not about, again, this is the Chabad idea. It's about starting with Chabad, with your Chochmah, Bina, and Daas. Understanding and appreciating. It's much harder work. Because you'd much rather go to a kumsitz and sing and get excited, and now, right, and dveikus. We're already in a state of dveikus. We're already cleaving to Hashem. But it's not real.
Change the way you do kumsitzes.
Change the what?
Change the way you do kumsitzes now.
How do you do kumsitz?
Kumsitzes, we talk between every song.
Oh, beautiful, right?
Because otherwise, I even told my friend this comes, I said, otherwise the singing is like the fire and then it dies.
Exactly.
If you want it to last, you have to add in the title.
Exactly. And if you want to do it really well, you'll take people that you learn with and make a kumsitz with them.
We did that.
And what does that do?
That's what we did. So it's kind of
Right? And what does that do? Now you're getting intellectual ideas. So and now you're creating an emotion. Emotions mean, what it means is that you're taking the midah, the intellect, into a practical level.
like if we would go from sheer straight to a kumsitz.
Correct. That's what a farbrengen is.
For 1 second, if
That's the definition of a brain.
Oh, you first have the share, and then you.
Correct?
I thought it's in between. Like,
Then you work it. Yep.
Hold on, let's back up. Why can't we work through emotions first? Through a medium first?
It's like trying to have children without parents. Because they're children. Like you can't have them without parents. It's not a real child. It's just a pretend. It's not real. If you got to an emotion, you got excited about something, but you don't, it's like if you go on a date, right, and you're trying to marry someone, and you build an emotional connection by touching and whatever else you do, right? So now you have a very beautiful, wonderful emotional connection, but you don't know if this person makes sense to you or not. So now you're going to run into a problem. What you want to do is first develop an intellectual connection. Does this person make sense? Then if it makes sense, now let's talk about emotions. Now let's develop from the intellectual an emotional connection. You see the difference? One is much more real. There's a foundation. You could build a house without foundations.
One is brain, one is heart.
One is brain-based. In other words, there's a foundation in the ground, and then the heart comes out of the foundation. The other one doesn't have a foundation. Not one's brain, one's heart. They both heart. But one is brain that leads to heart, the other one is just heart.
Infatuation versus love.
Yeah, and this is the Baal Tanya's approach, which is called Chabad, which is to go from Chachma Bina Daas, all the learning. That's what you're doing now. What are you doing now? You're learning. It's much more exciting, fiery to go open up any holy sefer, right, and get inspired, get fired up. You can get fired up, but you have no idea what's behind it. You don't understand it, right? And that's what we're doing. Chachma Bina Das. And then you arrive at once you understand. If you understand what Hashem is, and you learn about Hashem, and you learn that Ein Milvada, there's nothing besides Hashem, and you get into this mode, and you get it. God is unlimited, and you start seeing it in your life, and you meditate and contemplate. What does that mean that He's unlimited? And you work it through in your intellect, which is what we're doing right now. What you will arrive is your soul will be yearning towards Hashem. I want God, and that's connection. That's what he says. Let's read over here. V'hi kloi sanefesh. The soul yearns. My soul yearns for Hashem. My soul thirsts for Hashem. That's a soul that thirsts for, my soul thirsting for godliness. Because that's the way it works, right? If you go on the mountain and you're meditating on Hashem, it's beautiful. But in order for this to work, you have to go on the mountain, meditate on Hashem, after you have what to meditate on. What are you thinking about?
Well, you said this on one of your share, and I didn't like it because when I go to, you said that if you go to somewhere pretty, you don't necessarily connect to Hashem at first, but that, a lot of times that's where I do connect to Hashem, and I feel.
What do you mean, on a pretty mountain? Of course you connect from the pretty mountain.
Because you have the ground, the base thing. You know who created this world. You're not coming.
I remember once I saw a guy. He was in one of the shuls here, and he was doing, it was sukkahs, and he was doing nuim on sukkahs. He was shaking the lulav, making a bracha. He was by himself. I'm not sure what he was doing exactly, not in the sukkah, but he was shaking. And I watched him shake a lulav. I was like, I don't know, I'm a little bit sometimes, he was shaking a lulav like this. He was gonna. And he was just like so into it. He was like engrossed and enthralled by the whole thing. And I looked at this guy. I was staring at him for like a long time. And I admit, I was a bit sarcastic. So I walked over with him afterwards when he finished. And I said, can I just ask you a question? When you shake the lulav like that, so like take the lulav and you're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you thinking about? It's a lulav and an esrog, and you're just shaking it. What are you thinking about? And I thought, that he was going to give me like, oh, it's just something holy, whatever. The guy got me so good. He took out a siddur of the Alter Rebbe and all the kavanas, and he showed me what he was learning. And I was like, Wow. He blew me away. The guy, he literally was taking whatever he was learning, right, in there. He understood the whole thing, exactly what it was about, what a lulav represents, esrog, and the whole thing, and the achdus and going in together, and then the heart's over here, and then you want to go from the heart to every direction, and you got to in your life to bring it down and whatever.
And he was doing just that.
And he was doing just that. I was absolutely floored. I couldn't believe it. You know, absolute respect for the guy. He was literally sitting by himself. No one was watching. He was doing the nanuim and he was understanding. And he started off with an intellectual base and he moved into the emotions. And he was very into it. That's called, right, working from intellect into emotions. And Selini thought that the guy was theatrical, right. So what you're going to do is ignite in your heart, right, a fire and water. The fire is a burning yearning for Hashem. How do you ignite a fire of thirst? If you're thinking about what Hashem is, if you meditate on what Hashem is, you will arrive at a thirst for Hashem. In davening, part of the process is thinking about Hashem, thinking about how unlimited Hashem is, and then how insanely inferior this world is. And I want Hashem. Why don't I see Hashem? And that's the yearning for godliness.
Did you say that again?
When you, part of the art of davening, right, is to think about Hashem, think about God, and you start realizing Ein Mulbade. So meditate on this. What's Ein Mulbade? I don't know. Hashem created time and space. So good luck thinking about that. Time and space are creations. So how long has Hashem been around? And where is He? The question is a problem, right? And you start reflecting and meditating on that. He hasn't been around for billions and trillions of years. Actually, He created time. And I don't know what that means. And my head goes bonkers thinking about that, right? And then I'm thinking about how Hashem is, He created space. So where is He? He's everywhere. No, He's not.
In Kitta Aleph, we were told that the Chimish starts with the bias because we should not be thinking.
Right.
So what happens now?
That's a Gemara in Chagiga. The Gemara says it. That you should you have to stretch your capabilities to the utmost and know that you don't know.
When your brain starts to hurt.
Right. So there's a mitzvah deraisa. The first mitzvah of the Rambam, mitzvah number 1 in the Rambam is Yesodei Yesodis Amud HaChochmes Leida Sheyesham Motzi Rishon. It means the foundation of foundations and pillar of all wisdom is to know that there is a first being, a superpower. Not to accept it on faith, but to know it. To actually understand and integrate that understanding into your brain. It's called the mitzvah deraisa al yedias Hashem. And it's the most important mitzvah you could do. It's part of what we're doing right now. You're getting to know Hashem. What it means is, the bais is because there's emunah. So, most people who tell you they have emunah are not having emunah. Because if you're supposed to understand what you believe in, then you
Then
it's not belief.
The leap of faith part.
Like, do you believe God created the world?
Yes,
Yes. No, you don't.
I do.
Okay. Do you believe that a contractor created this room?
Yeah, because it wouldn't be.
I know that a contractor.
Right. You don't believe it. You know it.
That's what you
It's not real to say I believe this room was created by some contractor. You never saw the guy. You don't know what he is, but you know that buildings are not made by themselves, right? I don't need to see the guy to know that he made the room. It's not belief, it's knowledge. Right? So when you say, I believe Hashem created the world, that's ridiculous. Have the world came about by itself? No, it didn't. I know God created the world. Of course I know it. That's knowledge. Right? So there's belief versus knowledge. And what you want to do is expand your yediyah until the Rashba's word is Tachlis hayediyah sheloi neido acho. Until you know that you don't know.
Till your brain pops.
Till your brain pops. And then you say, okay, now we go to Emunah. Yes. And that will lead to emotions of excitement, of yearning to be connected to the superpower called Hashem. And an awe of Hashem. What?
You don't have time to do this every time you daven.
To do what?
To do this whole process every time you daven, you don't have time.
I mean,
don't know. It takes me about 2 seconds to get to the brain pop part. You start thinking about it, and literally within 2 seconds, I'm like, okay, I'm done.
It's very, very important. This is what Hasidim do. You learn Hasidus before davening whenever you can. You learn some Tanya. You Chazar before davening, and you learn it, and you know what's going on, and you connect to Hashem, and you find it. There's a lot more about to learn, but yeah. And on Shabbos you have more time. You do it on Shabbos for longer. That's how you daven. Of what? So what you're doing is igniting emotions. You ignite a fire and water. Fire is going to be a burning yearning for Hashem. And then you'll have the water, which is the intellect. So why is water intellectual? Because fire, midah is always on fire. They're exciting. What's water? Mellow. So chokhmah, the intellect, is much more watery. And they get together, and what's meant to happen is that if you put the fire under the water, but the water's in a pot, so the fire is going to cook the water. So if you have an idea, an intellectual idea, and then you work the emotion is going to get the water to be bubbling and boiling and getting excited. And that's what it means that emotions together with intellect work. Ushara midas kulam, the other midas, other emotions, in anfa yira va'ava, so they're saying, they stem from fear and awe. And this leads us, now that we've established this foundation of intellect leading to emotions, now we're going to take a look at this key faculty, the key sphere. We said there's 10 spheres, called Daas. Daas is probably the most important one in a certain sense. Chokhmah, Bina, and Daas. Ve'adas umiloshen ve'odom yoda es chava. When Adam and Chava got together and had a baby, Torah says, Adam knew Chava. Now, I use the word knew, but I don't think that the word knew does any kind of justice to Das. Das is not knowledge. What is Das? Das is what Adam did to Chava. What he did is called Das. The best way to express it is connection, right? Hiskashrus doesn't mean connection. Kesher means connection. Hitkashrut is more like, I guess, enmeshing, becoming one. What? Knotted, right. Hitchabrut, becoming absolutely unified with the subject matter that you're doing. You can learn things, and you're learning it, and it's all theory. And you can learn, and the theory comes alive into practice. And that comes about through Das. Shemekasher daitoi, you affix and connect your mind. Bekesher amitz vechozok me'oid, in a real deep connection. V'yizka machshavte b'choizek, and you affix your thought in intensely. Bigdulas and Seif Baruch Hu, in the greatness of Hashem, be'ena b'siach daiti, you don't let your mind go anywhere else. So, you could have Chokhmah and Bina, but you're not connected. Chokhmah and Bina means you understand something. When you understand something, it's theoretical, it's abstract. Only when you have Das does the Chokhmah and Bina penetrate you and the world. So a father and a mother on their own do not have babies. You need to have Das to have a baby. Even if you have all the Chokhmah and Bina, Big Dulas, who you understand and get Hashem and the greatness of Hashem. If you don't work on connecting and affixing your brain on the subject matter, you will get nowhere. You'll never get the true fear and love. You will have imaginary emotions. So here's how it works. What's the difference between learning a sugya? You learn something about, you learn a theory about, the guy buying a house and selling and how you do it and all the details, and you learn it in Gemara. And you're a kid in yeshiva and you're learning this Gemara and you understand the whole thing and it's beautiful. And then one day, you discover the actual situation comes up in real life.
And you get excited.
And you get excited. And
Really get it.
you go back to the subject matter and how you're learning it now.
You relearn it.
And
everything's
then
different.
context to self.
It like shines. There's clarity. Right? It's crystal clarity. Because what you had theorized before now comes alive in practice. That's the idea that is going on. That's called Daas. What we want to do is get Daas with everything we do. So that our learning is not just stuck in the level of theory, but penetrates the world of action.
So I read
Tachlis.
that book by Steiner Ginsburg, Your Awesome Self, and she says in there that when she gets, and now I'm connecting what she talked about that.
Das must be the result of Chochmah and Bina. Das, the goal of Das is to connect Chochmah and Bina together.
Right.
So if I'm sitting and imagining a big light on me, surrounding me, that's not really Das. It's true I'm meditating, but if I didn't do the work beforehand, so
No, because
how no, but
I did because
I'm saying, how do you know?
8 times.
Right, so let's just break it down. How do you know that Hashem is around you, that Hashem is enveloping you, and that His light is on you? How do you know?
Because I learned it.
Oh, so first you got to learn about it,
Right.
and you got to internalize that
And I was
actually,
trying to get from here to here.
but actually Hashem is creating the world every single second, right? So that's a concept to learn about. That God, how old is the world? How long ago was the universe created? The answer is
6,000. 5,000.
no, 1 second ago.
Oh, because Hashem Chol Yom.
How old is the world?
Right.
It's brand new.
Chadish Chol Yom.
Hashem's creating it right now. So you need to understand that and reflect on that, right? What's the reflection? The meditation is basically, Hashem creates the world. Hashem is unlimited. So how does the unlimited create a world, right? How does the bligvul and the gvul, unlimited and limited, ever meet? The answer is the unlimited hides himself, right?
Right.
So if he hides himself, it means he's doing something unnatural all the time.
Right.
So think about it. It's unnatural for the world to be. It's kind of like marriage. When, the Rogachov has wrote about that. He says marriage is every single moment. Why? Because it doesn't make sense. There's no reason you should be married. Why should you be married? Your child is your blood. So it's part of you. Marriage is not. The other person is not part of me. So what makes us one? Every time, I don't know, what does make you one?
Souls.
What?
Your souls are connected.
But you see how you have to work that into your life constantly. Oh no, we're one. We're one. Right? You have to
keep reminding yourself.
You have to keep reminding yourself, you have to keep thinking about it, that God put us together, and really it's Hashem making it, and this and this and this, and all of the little things you're going to do, because it gets hard. Because it isn't natural. So the same thing applies between us and Hashem. Hashem and the world, I should say. The world is a concealment of the divine. So if Hashem stops creating the world for 1 second, right, can't exist. Again, by the way, this is Shari Yichud V'Emunah, which is part 2 of Tanya. But look, if I put this tissue box on the table, do I have to worry about it now?
No.
Why? Because there's gravity, and so gravity keeps tissue boxes on tables. It's good. But if I decide to suspend the tissue box in midair, and I blow it, and then blow in the tissue box and have it suspended there, then what happens if I stop suspending it in midair?
It's being suspended.
So the world is not like a tissue box on a table. The understanding is the world is like a tissue box in midair.
Yeah, but really, when you understand the science and everything's atoms and matter, and all the atoms they're doing
Right.
everything, you understand that
How real it
really,
is.
How real it is that the Abishur is creating everything.
Exactly.
And when we were told that a mother just has to diaper her kids and bake and not learn, and just by doing she's believing, where does that come into play?
They don't. I mean, make it very clear.
That was just like the moral who doesn't have answers, so this will be the blanket umbrella to cover everything. All of you shut up and I'll
Thank you.
So it's like I was teaching that told her not to fire and ask the questions at the Rambam asked.
I just want to tell you that
I'm 19. OMG. Yeah.
you guys were taught about what?
They didn't. They just, plucked
And Emunah Pshuta, right.
But they were more connected. And those generations.
But you were taught that there's Sheish Mitzvahs Tmidius, 6 mitzvahs that apply all the time.
Yes,
Right.
CP.
What
When
are
I
those-
met the Lubavitcher girls 3 years ago. Before that, I
One
didn't
sec.
know.
You didn't know there's 6 mitzvahs you got to do all the time? Hold on. Just 1 second. Ladies are not obligated in time-related mitzvahs, but you are obligated in non-time-related mitzvahs, right? So mitzvahs asher man grama, I got it, but shaleh man grama, you're obligated. One of them is, what are the mitzvahs? Yeah. Knowing Hashem is one of them? Yeah. Knowing Hashem is one of them. So what's it got? It's not, maybe, even if you argue that you're not going to learn Torah nowadays, but knowing Hashem is an obligation on women too.
You can't know him unless you think on it.
You can't know him unless you learn about it.
You just know
You don't know Hashem. You believe in Hashem.
The consensus.
Don't assume knowledge of Hashem. It's not true.
It's like you're born from, so you know Hashem, so you know Hashem.
Right. So what's a mitzvah of Yedias Hashem?
It's just
To learn more about
The Abarbanel says, Kasher naniach emunas metzias hakel, koidem emunas metzias hakel. Sorry. Kasher naniach emunas metzias hakel mitzvah, kvar naniach emunas metzias hakel, koidem es leemunas metzias hakel. Abarbanel is saying, if you assume that emunah is a mitzvah, then you're assuming, no, if you're telling me to believe that emunah is a mitzvah, you're assuming that I believe that you're telling me to believe. How can you tell me to believe? How can it be a mitzvah to believe in Hashem if I have to believe in Hashem to believe in the mitzvah to believe in Hashem? In other words, the mitzvah of believing in Hashem is not believing in Hashem. If you don't believe in Hashem, you're not listening to the mitzvah. The mitzvah is to get to know Hashem intimately. That's the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem. It's a critical mitzvah. It's the first mitzvah in the Rambam, like I said. It's the foundation of everything that we are. And it works through Chachma, Bina, and Daas. What does Daas mean? Daas means that you go around and you meditate and you see Hashem in your life. I think one of the most powerful ways you could do Daas is by journaling. If you learn Hasidus and you journal your life and see God in your life, you'll see Daas. You'll get it. You'll see a lot of Hashem revealed in your life.
Where do you see Hashem in your life every day?
Yeah, you're journaling the work of me bringing Hashem into my life.
So the more you know Hashgacha Pratis in your life,
The more what?
the more you see Hashem.
Yes.
And you really know Hashgacha Pratis. He's with you. He's doing things for you.
Correct. If I believe in Hashgacha, exactly, let's say.
Don't believe
I learned about
you see
Hashgacha
it.
Pratis, right?
You really see.
Yeah, I learned about Hashgacha Pratis. What does it mean I learned about Hashgacha Pratis? I learned that Hashem creates the world every single second. That's nice. Now write it down. Next time it happens to you and something comes about and you get blown away, like, wow.
And when you really think about it, because one day
And you
when I
suddenly
was
see-
thinking like, I need Hashem, like daven.
We just learned in chapter 2 that every Jew has DNA of Hashem. Every single Jew. And we learned that you go through the brain, which means your body has a brain. So the brain is more connected to the Father than the toe. That's true. But there actually is no difference, and the heel is just as
Part of
DNA. It doesn't know about it without the brain, but it's just as much DNA. Now try that when you have a child and you suddenly meditate and reflect on that idea, right? You learn the idea, and then you're like, application, meditation, journaling with my child. Look at that. I really applied what I theorized in chapter 2 in Tanya into my child. That you see Daas? Now what you learned and then you see it alive, and the child, you see the child suddenly does something, and you right, stories you tell about, and then you see Elokus right there. There's God in this child who's seems to be everything against Hashem, but you suddenly see Hashem revealed in that kid. You see what Daas is? If you didn't learn about the idea, then you're having Daas without having foundation. So you have to have the Chachma and the Bina, and then you'll start seeing the Daas as Daas. Now you understand what a Jew is. So Daas is the key part of intellect. Again, Daas is not an emotion. It isn't an emotion. It's when the stuff that you learn
Become real.
sinks and connects and you get it. It's very powerful.
It's meditating, but not action. It's not taking your chachma and bina, putting it into action. It's just
Correct.
still sitting with it.
It's the Chochmah and Bina, and suddenly it starts to, the Chochmah and Bina, they cohabit. Right? That's Das. Das is cohabitation, when they get together.
Not putting it into a day-to-day.
I'm saying when you see the stuff, when you see it in day-to-day life, and the stuff you understood in the books comes to life, that's called Das. Because now suddenly you like, I get it, and the way you get it now, it's a different league, the way you understand.
When it comes to life in a concrete way.
Right. It's very, very, very real. That's called Das. And as a result of this, what I say is that so Das is the foundation of Midas, the working of the Midas, and Das is what makes it work. Now, I want to just reflect for a moment. You know, I think it's well known as something called his boidedus. You know what his boidedus means?
Meditation.
Being alone.
Seclusion.
No. Boidedus is seclusion, going around the forest and
Oh, yeah.
being with the trees and screaming. Or whatever you do in the forest, right? So in Chabad we don't believe in it.
Some of us are screamers.
We don't believe in it.
You don't believe
Nope.
because nature.
His boidedus as a goal on its own doesn't work. Because what are you going to think about when you go there? How are you going to be in a state where you're going to be...
Isn't it more of a release?
So his boidedus requires something to reflect on. It's called his boidedus. What you want to do is you learn about the idea, you learn about Hashem, and now you're able to activate it into your life and think about it and reflect on it and contemplate it. Then, if you want to do that properly, you want to go be by yourself in a place where no one's around, you do his boidedus, and you're able to concentrate. And the stuff that you learn will come to life, to a beautiful, incredible life that it comes to. That's called Das. That's called Das. So what we need is, David HaMelech calls it in Tehillim, he says, Kirvas Vani Kirvas Elikim Li Toiv. Kirvas Elikim Toiv means I learn about Hashem, how great Hashem is, how wonderful and beautiful Hashem is. Having done that and understood Hashem, after you learned, let's say you learned some Tanya, you learned some Hasidus, there's one more step you must do, and that is meditation. What does meditation mean? What is the connection between the stuff that I learned and me? That's meditation. Bring it into life. You sit down and you meditate, how does this apply to me? And then it comes alive. Then the subject matter actually starts to be integrated into you. And therefore, Das is Kiyum Midas V'Chayuson. How do you make babies? Fathers and mothers get together, and then there's a life force issued to a baby. So when you sit and meditate and engage and deeply internalize the stuff that you learn, now it becomes real. And therefore I say that Das it's the life of Midas. Das incorporates in it both Chesed and Gvura. And what does that mean? Das is not an emotion, but Das is the source of emotions. So once you have Das, you'll see yourself gravitating towards one direction, intellectually, not emotionally, but you'll see yourself gravitating towards an experience. So if you can look at your child and really, really understand, you need to learn it really well. You need to learn every Jew there's principles. Every Jew has a godly soul. So I have a godly soul, and my child has a godly soul. And when I see them through my godly soul eyes, and I see them, and I can access their godly soul. So if I look through my godly soul, and I only see their godly soul, then what I'm going to do is be able to ignite the godliness inside them, because every single Jew has Elokus built into them. So take a concept like that, and then you learn about it in Tanya. Now you sit down with it, and you're like, let's do this. So go ahead and write down and journal how you do it. What does this mean?
But without wanting any result.
The what?
But without wanting any result.
No results. Right?
That is a result. Seeing the neshama, seeing each guy is a result.
And then igniting his neshama. And then having his
You're
neshama
having an
ignite.
agenda.
That's exactly my point. That agenda part.
The agenda is an Nefesh exactly. That's the animal soul.
It's a pretty good agenda, though.
I mean,
Like a terrible agenda. What am I asking
You know,
for?
like
It's not a bad agenda. What is the problem?
my daughter, as a kid, she went to some kind of gathering, and they had the kids and whatever. She goes, "Ma, he has an agenda." I was into that. It was in the early times.
who has that agenda? The guy who made it, you mean?
Yeah, like we had
No
a gathering,
agenda.
whatever. But she felt it right through him. He's trying to make us from. That was the end of it. It was finished. Once you have that, it's they feel it.
Right. Pirush, Ava Banafel, Vira Banafel. So, love and everything that comes from it, and fear and everything that comes from it, needs to stem from a space of Das. Now, when you operate from a space of Das, you're going to operate a whole different type of environment. Everything's going to be different about you. Imagine everything you're doing was because of the intellect began it. So let's call this thing called trigger. So my child tells me that I don't want to date a guy who's got a havrusa. So that means right away, what does it do to me? Trigger. Yeah. So the key is now notice the trigger by me. And okay, and what's the chokhmah bin Daas over here? Means what is the actual answer? Right? What's the answer?
So she's not clear yet because she's finding the Ishtar from her space.
That's not an answer you're telling her. What is
There's a neshama in pain, and Hashem wants to reach this neshama. I just heard a magnificent story. It's just one of those absolutely magnificent stories from, I saw a video clip of it from Chaim Shalom Deitch. He is a very chashav rav in Yerushalayim. And he said as follows, that there was a Jew who grew up in Yerushalayim, and his parents died when he was very young. And so they sent him, back in the day, in the 1950s, 60s, they sent him to the place where you sent everybody, which was called Diskin. Have you heard of Diskin?
Yes.
I don't know. I think my grandfather was in Diskin. That's where he grew up. I think it was, I'm not sure, but it sounds like a very abusive place. Chal Yerushalayim was abusive, and certainly this place. Anyway, like many others who came out of there, he came out completely uninterested in anything Jewish. And he went to live by himself as a single. When he was 18 years old, he went to live in Haifa. Haifa was the,
happening place?
run away from anything Jewish. So he flees all the way there, he gets there, and it's Friday night. But, he knows the Yiddish of Yerushalayim and not this Israeli mentality of here, and he's a chassid. So he wants to go for a tish on Friday night. So he hears there's a tish, there's a Seret Viznitzer Rebbe in Haifa. So he decides to go to the Rebbe. He's coming in, but it was too far. So he drove. He took his car and he drove on Friday night, came to the Rebbe, drove in. He arrived at the Rebbe and he's sitting and listening, and then he goes, he loved the whole tish. He just absolutely loved it. The soul still wanted it. And after the tish is over, he goes over to the Rebbe and gives a shalom aleichem. But he's an honest guy, so he doesn't want to lie. So what he tells the Rebbe is, Rebbe, so I want you to know that I drove here. That's what his statement was. His Rebbe, I drove here. He says, this is back in the day, right? The Seret Viznitzer Rebbe looks at him and he says, mein teure Ingele. He says, he gives him a big hug and he embrace, and he says, kannst kommen, wie du willst und wenn du willst, do whatever you want, however you want, as long as you come. And Rabbi Deitch says, he says, I know the guy, but he's a Streimer wearing Jew today with children and grandchildren and, a whole family that came out of that moment. What does it take? It takes us to go into a space of Chochmah and Bina, which is not the beginning of the mitos, because if you go by the emotions, you're like, shaigetz, that's the emotion's going to say, and you have to be able to zone out of the emotion into the intellect. The intellect is what makes sense over here. It's a neshama, it's a chelik elikam mamish. It's a part of God. And if you ascertain intellectually that this guy is a Machal Shabbos of Hesia, and that's what he is. He's, desecrating Shabbos, then that's what you should respond in kind. But if you know his story, that he was a little orphan, and you understand the details, then you get that he's probably just a kid in pain. Most likely. And if so, what's the way to deal with him? It's to give him empathy for what he's done over there. So there's Chochmah and Bina. When he actually comes in front of you, now comes a Daas. What do I do now? Now meditate on that and journal it. And I gave him a hug. And you'll learn how loving Jews is not theoretical. It's practical. It's actual. I think that when it comes to our own kids, then that's Daas. Because up until that point, very nice ideas of Avos Yisrael and loving every fellow Jew and whatever. Very, very nice. But when it happens in my home to my kid, now suddenly I'm forced to walk into the domain of Daas. Now suddenly it's the theory has to come to life. And when the theory comes to life, that's the beginning of emotions. Chapter 4 we'll do next time, God willing. That's going to be about, now we've discussed the intellect and emotions, we're going to move into the thought, speech, and action, which are garments of the soul.
So what would the right answer have been? Not that I said anything, I thought a lot, but I didn't.